Leaders of the B Corp movement are here to discuss responsible consumption and production from a variety of perspectives, and how to use business as a force for good.
Well, welcome to our breakout session. It is September 23rd, and we are on day 2 of the SDG Action Zone. For well over a decade, B Corps have pioneered a better way of doing business. And in doing that, they have provided a proof of concept that a stakeholder-centric global economy is possible. Like all of us, these business leaders find themselves trying to fine-tune what it means to transform the global economy to benefit all people, communities, and the planet in the context of an unprecedented global crisis that is painfully reminding us of interdependence and that we all need to work together to that 2030 agenda. Today, we're going to hear firsthand from 4 leaders of B Corp movement. We will dive into SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, a global goal that sits at the heart of the transformation that we seek. I am Laura Velez from BLab, and I'll be moderating this discussion. Joining us from Atlanta in the United States is Jasmine Crowe. She is founder and CEO of Goodr, a company that has diverted nearly 2 million pounds of food from landfills. Marcelo Behar, joining us from Brazil, is Vice President for Sustainability and Group Affairs at Natura & Co., the global beauty group that comprises Avon, Natura, The Body Shop, and Aesop. Natura & Co. is committed to address the climate crisis, protect the Amazon, defend human rights, and embrace circularity. Also with us is Etta Madete, joining us from Kenya. Etta is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and architectural designer at BuildX Studio, a company that creates buildings for a radically better tomorrow. And last but not least, Charmian Love. Joining us from the UK, she is a social entrepreneur in residence at the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Saïd Business School at Oxford. Charmian is also a co-founder of BLab UK. Thank you all for being here. So to start, I'd love to ask each of you, why is SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, important to you and your organization? And Jasmine, you're going to get us started.
Thank you so much, Laura. I will definitely think that, SDG number 12 is really important to the work that we do at Goodr, because we are aiming to solve food waste, which is a huge crisis that, we talk about, but I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention just to the implications that food waste have on our environment. And we want to talk about being more sustainable and developing more responsible, but we're wasting 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food on the consumer-facing level here in the United States. Why that is important to us is we have 2 really big goals at Goodr. The first is reducing food waste, and the second is ending hunger. We believe that no one should ever have to decide if food is a necessity in their household in a country where we're wasting 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food that can be going to feed somebody. So I think that's why it's really important to us. It's something that we embody every single day when we come in here. We are trying to work with businesses to help them understand that their food waste has true implications and that we can create a more circular economy. Food is a very precious material. And so if we want to talk about being responsible in our consumption patterns, we definitely have to recognize that when food goes to waste and people go hungry, a lot of people lose and no one wins.
Thank you, Jasmine. So Marcelo, over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. So at Natura & Co., as you've mentioned, we have different companies which are big companies. So Natura was founded 50 years ago already in the principles of having natural ingredients in its formulations. And after many years, it expanded its activities throughout Brazil, especially to the Amazon region. And I think what made Natura really special, and it's interesting to see that this group has these 2 different approaches for a more sustainable supply and a way to better understand how the ingredients are sourced from, both from Natura and from the Body Shop. So the connection with communities and the way that we source directly from them. So considering not only the effects of the sourcing inside the products, but also inside communities' lives, changing the way that they preserve their environment, that they do their business, and that they create not only ties with ourselves, but with the region and with the environment that they are surrounded with. So I think for SDG number 12, what we foresee is that consumers are now getting more and more conscious about where their products are coming from and how were they sourced. So to get that connection with not only the Amazon forest, but 28 communities that the Body Shop source all over the globe is something that makes, I think, our business model something very interesting to be better known and to create a better perception between the connection that consumers have between products and the supply chain. So looking to the future, what we foresee for the next 10 years is that we will be defending more and more that business model, expanding it. So nowadays, doing that the way we do is protecting an area inside the Amazon region, which is half the size of Holland. We are going to double that within the 10 years, and we are going to foster collective efforts towards making zero deforestation in the Amazon region possible by 2025. So that's what we're aiming for, and we are more than glad to have others in the journey. So please feel free to connect us and to join us on that.
Thank you, Marcelo. And Etta, different industry for you. Why does SDG 12 matter in building?
Well, at BuildX Studio, we envision a world made for people and planet through creating inspiring, creative spaces that are built from low carbon materials, bio-based materials, trying to be as sustainable as possible. And for us, we've sort of been living in a bit of a bubble because we've been using SDG 3, for example, on health and well-being, or SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and focusing on SDG 13 on climate action. But in reality, working in the context that we're in right now, you cannot say you're building sustainably until you make sure that you're keeping your entire value chain accountable. So you cannot guarantee a green building without guaranteeing a green building supply. So for us, SDG 12 became the key to actually achieving the mission and vision that we set out to achieve. And once we shifted our model towards focusing on sustainable production, consumption, and supply, we saw a complete shift. One was in the way that we deal with energy. So for one, we look at reducing waste in our entire system and entire process. Our construction projects and our design projects aim to be completely circular. So for example, the timber that is used to build the formwork for the wall is taken into a compost heap to create biogas energy that feeds back into the facility. So trying to make sure even the construction and the design is reducing waste. I mean, 29% of global energy is consumed by households alone. And basically that's to do with natural lighting, natural ventilation, not being factored into the design. So we're also encouraging our clients to build sustainably and ensuring that we're designing spaces that do not use energy inefficiently. The second way is by making sure that we're sourcing materials in a sustainable manner. And again, in this context, in the African context, the supply industry is very evasive, basically. So for us, we prioritize a due diligence process for all the materials that we supply. For example, the timber that we are sourcing needs to come from a commercially certified forest, not just from any forest, any kind, as well as ensuring gender equity and representation in the supply chain. So we make sure that we have gender parity when we're looking for suppliers. And for that, we think the difference with that is that in reality, the sustainable certified option is not always the cheapest, but we believe by ensuring that that's our priority, we'll end up stimulating the right kind of suppliers and the right kind of demand. And for us, we are very cognizant of the fact that 800 billion tons of natural resources is held up in the built environment. And for us to build the cities of the future, we need to make sure that as consumers of these building materials, we are responsible. And because of that, if you're responsible, we'll end up having the power to change production patterns.
So Charmian, you sit kind of at the nexus of business, companies like the three that we're hearing from, and academia. And I, wonder from where you stand, why is SDG important, SDG 12 in particular, but in general, the whole agenda important? And what are businesses doing?
Amazing. Well, I was going to say, I'm so loving this panel. I know we're only just getting started, and I already feel like we're not going to have enough time to talk about all the wonderful threads here. But I do want to just pick on something that Etta said that I think was really, I'm feeling just a lot, like, this idea that actually there's the creativity, like how do we imagine what the cities of the future can be? So I'm sort of smiling big and just thinking about that. I also, I guess just wanted to sort of share a little bit about this idea that actually everything that's been said before, I would agree with. And I think this is a powerful and really an important moment we're living in right now. I do want to also acknowledge that I think, all the SDGs are important, actually. And in fact, one of the students I worked with at Oxford a few years ago had this great way of describing the SDGs is actually, it's like a big bowl of rainbow spaghetti. There's all these different noodles and they're all sort of mixed together in this like quite delicious, platter of pasta. And I guess I really believe that actually. I think we always constantly have to be thinking of, yes, the individual SDG, and in the context of this conversation, SDG 12, and it's not an either or, and thinking of the bigger, like, bowl of pasta. Now, I do know that this conversation is about SDG 12, and so I think you got Etta called it a key, and I kind of think of it as like one of the key, the delicious noodle, like it's a noodle in that bowl of spaghetti. And I think the reason why I feel like it is an important one for us to really spend time talking about is because it links to how we think about growth. And we've already heard some great examples and stories of like how each of your organizations are thinking about how to address the challenges and the changes that are happening around us, and how you're using your business as a force for good. And I think it's really important for us to highlight these stories because for some reason out there's this expectation, right, that we are going to have these infinite growth trajectories. We keep on seeing these things with like arrows going up, which is partly why I love that the SDG 12 logo is an infinity loop. It's like the circles are going around. But for the most part, we see lines going up. And I think we really do need to challenge and rethink this, because actually we live on a planet of finite resources. So like this idea that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet just doesn't stack up, actually. And one of the things that I kind of have been pretty inspired by is actually a piece of writing from one of my colleagues at Oxford, Andrew White. And he wrote a piece that was about addressing paradox. And what he talked about was that to address a paradox, you first have to accept it, then you can confront it, and then you transcend it. And, when I think about SDG 12 and sort of these challenges around how do we rethink and reimagine growth, I kind of think that's an interesting framework, because I think the first step is we are accepting that there is a problem with sort of the current model of growth. We are actively confronting it because we're having these conversations and people are talking about the need to rethink and reimagine what business and what growth looks like. And then finally, we're actually getting to this really exciting stage where we are transcending it, because we're exploring these business models, these new policies that can enable a transition to a regenerative and circular economy. So I think it's super exciting. And as important as what we're doing, I think is also how we do it. And I just been reminded recently of a quote from one of our actually UK B Corps. So definitely not my quote, theirs, but Toast Ale. And it's a circular business that brews beer with the surplus fresh bread that would otherwise be going to waste. So there's a nice circular story to all of this. But what they've said is that if you're going to change the world, you better throw a better party than the people that are destroying it. And I love that as an approach, because actually I think if we can harness the creativity, the positive energy, and the joy, and sort of lend it to this really important and exciting moment to rethink growth, will bring a lot of new energy to this SDG innovation process. So thank you.
Amazing. So I think, one of the common threads in everything that you've all shared is first the scale of the need, right, and the opportunity. How we're doing things right now, our current global patterns of consumption production are just not working as they are. But picking up on where you kind of just left, Shar, it is going to take a party, right? And I think what's powerful about a party is that there's more than one entity, one individual, one organization in it. So my second and really last question for this very brief conversation of ours is, how could those approaches, innovations, ways in which your organizations are tackling this opportunity, how can they be scaled and replicated, right? How do you see the invitation of others into the party, essentially, and do you think it'll work? And do you have any concerns there as well? Jasmine, let's go with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that this could be scaled globally. Goodr currently has requests in 17 other countries to bring our technology there. And I think that's one of the very reasons why we believe that technology was the greatest thing that we could use to actually scale and scale fast. We've built technology that really connects excess food with need in a matter of minutes. An algorithm that matches, for example, a restaurant has 500 pounds of food, which nonprofits can accept it. And we get delivery partners and get it picked up and delivered right away where it's fast and efficient, not having to worry about all of the food safety kind of pillars that have hurt us in the past. So we believe that, through the technology aspect, we can scale. And I also think that this should be replicated. I'm very fascinated by what's happening in countries like France and Italy that have actually made it illegal for businesses to waste food, and they're actually fining businesses. I'm hoping that kind of impetus spreads across the globe, because if it could be illegal in one country, it should be illegal in all countries, because hunger knows no bounds. No one is discriminated from the plight of hunger. So I believe that this should be in any single country, and I think that this could scale with the Goodr technology, and we're really excited to begin some pilots in a few other countries over the next year. And obviously COVID slowed us down a little bit, but we do believe that within the next year, 2021, you should see Goodr's technology in other cities and countries.
Amazing. And Marcelo, I mean, I think Natura is actually a great example of, doing things differently in an industry that has had some, problematic practices historically, which is, the personal care industry, and really trying to take that deep within the company, and now, in your role in Natura & Co, bring it to even more, companies in the same industry. So would love to hear how you, particularly at Natura & Co, think about this, but also, more broadly, how do we make this new way of producing and consuming contagious?
Very good question, Laura, sorry. And just love what was just said regarding our common purpose on regeneration and placing things together and doing things in larger scale and engaging others on the way of doing that. So that's really important. So Natura started 50 years ago here in Brazil. Nowadays, we operate over 100 countries, and we are connected by many networks trying to enlarge what we're doing and our best practices in terms of sourcing and supplying directly from communities. That I think is the most important part, which is to see the challenges that are social and environmental challenges as business opportunities. So, and to take the most, not only in the business perspective and on the growth perspective, but also on reshaping towards facing equality, facing all the climate issues that we are facing nowadays. So I think there is a very practical example on how could that operate and how could that work, which is also from the heart of the Amazon forest. Natura was there for over 10 years, sourcing different ingredients and using that in cosmetics, as you said. And we had a champion for its hydrating power, which was castanha, an ingredient from Brazil. And after a few years operating there, we understood that one species was about to get extincted. It was called the ucuba tree. And then we start studying, and we place a lot of energy and resources on not only innovation, but also R&D and science to understand the power of not only the tree itself, but its seeds. And the tree was being used to produce broomsticks and roofs in the richest part of Brazil, the southern part of Brazil. And it was being taken away and chopped by the community. And we understood that its seeds had an amazing hydrating power, which was even superior than the castanha used to have. So we thought about, what about creating a new line of products out of that fruit from that tree, so we could maybe pay more to the community every year. Instead of chopping and taking away the tree, they would start planting the tree again. So that's what we did, and we created a whole line called out of the ucuba tree, and we were able to pay 3 times more than the tree used to cost for its wood. So that's the regenerative way of producing the regenerative way of sourcing that we think will join not only Natura & Co and its 4 brands, but most of the cosmetic industry, hopefully in the future, and looking for opportunities inside nature-based solutions that will help at the same time different aspects of the crisis that we are facing. Not only the loss of nature and also the thing for carbon, so setting the carbon on the ground and using more nature-based solutions, but also providing to consumers goods and products that they are not only using for their well-being, but the well-being of others, the well-being of the planet as a whole. So that's the business model that we really trust on, and that's what we are doing on our daily activities.
I love the transition from what you just shared and now onto Etta to talk about the built environment. You know, this apparent duality, I guess, in trying to kind of seek inspiration from nature as opposed to build from, the human mind. And I'd love to hear, Etta, how you think of also an industry that requires a lot of rethinking and how you all tackle it and see it growing beyond what BuildX can do.
For us, I think I'll echo what the rest have said. We're inviting everyone to the party. Basically, we're going open source. And the reason that I can actually say BuildX is the only architecture and construction company in Africa that is B Corp certified is because we do not, our industry, what happens is that you build something great and sustainable, and then you make it super expensive, inaccessible, and it becomes a very high-end item. But for us, once we develop a solution, what we want to do is make it open source, accessible to everyone to scale and build with. The vision we have for the future cities is bio-based, it is sustainable, it is healthy, it is inspiring, but we don't think we're the ones who are going to build it. We don't think we're the ones who are going to design all of it. What we're going to do is develop prototypes that will stimulate demand, that will stimulate supply of better materials, that will stimulate the public to demand better materials. Because people do not ask for things that they cannot see. So for us, as I said, everyone is welcome to the party. We'll develop the solution. We're working with partners who are willing to enable us to build on this project. For one example is our Zima Affordable Housing Project. And again, affordable housing has almost become an acronym for housing that nobody understands. But for us, what we're doing is we're developing actually an affordable housing unit, which is sustainable, which is accessible. There's a module that we're developing as well in our innovation lab that is looking at prefabricated housing made from bio-based materials such as timber and bamboo. And the idea is that we're not going to just say, you know what, we have done the Zima homes, come to us for this exclusive offer. But no, what we're going to do is we're going to build the first Zima home, show people that it's possible to build sustainably, to live sustainably, to live healthily, and to make it affordable and accessible to all. And then we'll ask people, can you do this? Can you do this in your home? Can you do this in your context? And from there, we have the first Zima home, the second, and then hopefully we'll see 300 or 800 or 5,000. So the future cities are not exclusive and very particular. And for us, we don't want to make sustainability a sort of it word. We wanted to make it a practical, tangible thing. And for us, we do not, a sustainable solution to a social issue is only sustainable if it is scalable. And in the architecture and construction industry, many times it is not. It is one idea that one company has and keeps and creates the rights for it. So for us, we want to go open source, and it's not just in the affordable housing sector. We're also working with a company to do warehouses and industrial sector components that are sustainable. And from there, we can be able to scale the future industrial sector of Africa, which is completely booming right now. And we believe that bio-based materials, again, for us, bio-based materials is not an it word. It's not like, ooh, we want to build from timber and bamboo. We're going all the way down to the value chain. So we founded a company called BuildHer, which basically is going back to the roots and training women in construction, in woodwork, in being able to handle site management, because once you're able to get to the roots, you're able to inspire the entire community who is led by women, who is led by men, who is led by people in the grassroots. We believe we'll be able to stimulate demand and ensure that whatever sustainable solution we have, whether it's BuildHer or Zima affordable housing or sustainable bio-based industrial products, it is accessible to all and it is accepted by all. Again, we cannot assume that people understand what sustainable means. I mean, the pyramid in the African context looks like this, and the people who understand sustainability is at the top of the pyramid. So how are you going to influence consumption and production with people who have no idea what you're talking about? But through the built environment, through the things that people see, interact with, touch, and feel, we want to be able to stimulate the market to realize that it is possible, it is accessible. And the beauty about it is that in the African context, we're basically an agricultural economy that is booming. So we have we are primed to be able to create this change that we want to see in the world. It's not hypothetical. We are able to grow the materials that can build the cities of our future. And to do that, we need to start from the entire, and we need to scale the entire value chain. And at BuildX, we don't just start from the middle. As I said before, we were in a little bubble, but now anytime we have a solution, anytime we have an idea, we start all the way from where are the forests, who's growing the forest, who do we start talking about in the community to believe that forests can be able to be an economic incentive, that we can plant trees to build our future cities. And so for us, SDG 12 is important just in order to shift our thinking, shift the way that we see the solution, and shift the way that we see the people who will activate that solution. It's not just one company, it's not just one person, it's all of us. Thanks.
Etta, thank you. And Shar, before I turn it over to you, I just want to highlight some of the common threads that I'm hearing in ways that this can really be, replicated, scaled, and actually meet the problem at its scale. One is, I think Jasmine, you mentioned this policy, right? I think obviously this is a conversation with business leaders, but the importance of, the context in which businesses are operating, being supportive of this way of producing and consuming. I think it's an interesting, addition to this conversation. Seeking inspiration, right, in places and in people and in areas that may not be traditional sources of thinking for business innovation is another thread. And I also hear a lot around accessibility and inclusivity, right? A solution that is working for sustainable production and consumption needs, by definition, and I hear this in all your answers, to be inclusive of everyone that needs to be part of that solution, essentially, and tangible, to your point, Etta, right? So that we know what it looks like, and then it makes it a lot easier for us as consumers even to understand what to look for even. So Shar, I would love, for you to kind of close us off with, what are you sensing, witnessing, that is making this way of producing and consuming, and to earlier points, supplying as well, right? Thinking about the entire way in which we do business, what is making that more available and more broadly, effective to meet the issues where they're at?
Yeah, I exactly. I'm so excited to tuck into this. I do think you just did a gorgeous job, of actually weaving together a series of beautiful golden threads that have come up. So I just want to acknowledge that was a really nice way to pull together all these threads. I'm kind of thinking now of a weaving tapestry with threads. I've got like a bowl of spaghetti, but it's good. I can see you doing the dance moves as well. So that happens at the party. Great. So I think there's sort of like two points maybe that I want to touch on just briefly. One is, I think, of the really important role of education in this entire process. So again, of all these threads we've talked about, we have to very clearly and intentionally find ways of bringing these stories, bringing these practices, bringing these experiments, bringing this openness to the next generation of leaders that are coming through. And the great thing is that there are high density places where young people gather to learn and explore and try. And so how we bridge with the education facilities that exist out there. I have the great privilege of hanging out at Oxford and getting a chance to engage with some of the students there. And I think, just three ways that we're trying to educate and trying to bring this in. I'll sort of briefly summarize. I mean, one is really looking at this as a system. And I think there's some really important programming that's being developed as part of what they call at Oxford Go-To, and that's for all MBA students. I have to go through this project called Go-To, which stands for Global Opportunities and Threats Oxford, and it's really designed to give students the skills and some tools, practical, tangible ways to approach systems challenges. So learning how to map systems, learning what the power of design thinking is, how do we go on user journeys, how do we think about scenarios. And this year, actually, every year they choose a theme. This year it was climate action. And actually one of the tracks we had was around rethinking growth. And I think my reflection from that experience was there's just such brilliant ideas already brewing in these educational spaces with student energy. The second thing is in the classroom. So I have the joy of teaching an MBA elective on the regenerative and circular economy. This year it used to be the circular economy, and this year we added regenerative and circular for the reasons we've already discussed here today. And what's really fun in that classroom is actually what we do is we bring in a lot of practitioners, a lot of guest speakers. You know, these are people that can share their stories of what's happening in practice, like right now, entrepreneurs, investors, people that are policy experts, like CEOs of big companies. And then we pair that with sort of some of the really like quite rigorous research that's being done on regenerative economy and circular economy. So it's like, it creates this really exciting space for innovation and ideas and sharing and mutual learning in the classroom. So I think that's another place to have scale, because our hope is that every student that comes through the overall business MBA program will have the skills to think about the systems. And those that take the circular economy class will have sense of what does regeneration mean in practice. And we're hoping that when they go out, they'll bring that energy, they'll bring that insight with them. The other thing we've got going on, which it's just interesting to note in terms of, again, how we create the conditions for innovation and the important conversations, is we've got a circular economy lab that's started a few years ago. It's incubated at the Skoll Center. This year, the student team, they sort of devise what they want to do. And it's sort of at this stage now fairly pan-Oxford. And they decided to do a video, which was crowdsourcing what students felt the future was that they wanted to build towards. And it's just this beautiful video of like the vision of what could a different systems look like. And it has a lot of what we've talked about today: openness, inclusivity, solidarity, circularity, regeneration, community. So it's great to see that that's already emerging in the forward-looking view that students have. And I think we've all been sort of quite inspired by a quote, and I think it was Marian Wright Edelman who said, you can't be what you can't see. So how do we start imagining and envisioning what the future could look like so that we can be it? The second point I wanted to say, in addition to sort of the education space, and maybe now I'll kind of put on my B Lab UK hat here, very subtle, right, with my little B Corp in the background. But I think the real power of collective action here is going to be an important thing. So I think we've already talked about this, so I won't speak too much, but it's about recognizing that we will go further together. And we have to do it. Like the speed and the importance of the emergency, the climate emergency we're facing, means that we have to find ways to work much more inclusively and in concert with one another. And I've got real hope on that from what I see within the B Corp community. Of course, we have movement builders. We have the B Corp Climate Collective, again, which is about, yes, the importance of what you do as an individual business, and not either or, but and how we come together as a community to work on important issues. So here in the UK, a few years ago, we actually had an SDG 12 hackathon, which was super fun. And we had a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different companies come together to try and like hack some ideas around SDG 12. Within the B Corp Climate Collective right now, I know that in the US, there's a group that's working on a playbook and a toolkit for regenerative business models. So again, it's about bringing people together, sharing what's working, and finding a way to communicate it more widely. Here in the UK, we've actually got a circular economy working group within our local climate collective, and they've got like brilliant ideas. Like, how do we turn sort of some of the quieter high streets into circular workshops? Like, and these are the ideas that are possible when we come together. So anyways, I really do believe that we are at a moment that really, really matters, and that SDG 12 is a really important guide for how we can focus our collective energy, how we can educate and learn from one another, and ultimately, coming back full circle, pardon the pun, party, because we're going to create a better party. This is really creative, energetic, exciting, and hopeful work. And I think together we're kind of a magnet for the people that want to be a force for good.
Thank you, Shar. I think it's really much needed energy too for us to bring into it. We all have our daily work, and now we're mostly doing it from home, and we've got children, and we've got lives that are running a mile a second. Some of us are bringing children into the world soon, which is exciting. And it can be a lot, right? When you look out the window and you see everything that's going on, and you start sensing that what you do, even if it's a lot, it's not enough. And so I think I appreciate the message of this conversation, to be really thoughtful about your individual action, but then make sure that it's not just your individual action that you're enabling, that you're inviting others in to do their part, and to let them decide what their part looks like, but to give them the resources and the inspiration. So this has been fascinating for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. Jasmine, Marcelo, Etta, Charmian, you showed up beautifully, and you show up every day in leading this work around the globe. Thank you to the SDG Action Zone, obviously, for having us. And I do have two quick messages for those that are listening to us or watching us. One is, if you work in a business and you think that there's more that you could be doing, or you would like to figure out how to use the SDGs as an inspiration to take it to the next level, do check out the SDG Action Manager, which is a free and confidential tool that you can find at sdgactionmanager.com. It really will help any business, any size, any industry, anywhere in the world, to figure out what the next step should look like, and what you can do from where you sit. And then for all of us, we're all consumers, obviously, we know that every purchase is an opportunity to have an impact, right? And so if you're curious about B Corps, go to bcorporation.net. Obviously, this is an incredible conversation that has been curated with B Corps, but there are many, many more companies that are, both doing amazing work and continuing to step up their game day in and day out, because this is, the task is never fully done. So thank you for having us and for allowing us to share what we know, and also what we're still learning.